Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar on land banking with a focus on the application of land banking instruments in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. We are an FAO finalizing a study on good European practice on land banking, and this webinar is also part of the consultation of the main findings of the study and its key recommendations. My name is Morten Hartvigsen. I'm Land Tenure Officer at the FAO Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia, and I'm the moderator of the webinar today. This webinar will discuss Western European land banking experiences and how to build on these good practices when we are supporting the introduction of land banking instruments in countries in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. I will now hand over to Raimund Jähle, the Regional Program Leader of the FAO Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia, for the opening, before I will introduce the program of the next 2 hours and also give a short technical introduction to land banking. Raimund, over to you.
Thank you, Morten, for giving me the floor. Good morning, everybody. Very much welcome you all on this webinar on land banking on behalf of the Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia. And we're very happy to see you on this important topic. The COVID crisis has really demonstrated that the vulnerability of the food systems, and particularly also food value chains, and therefore also the economic, environmental, and social dimension is really important to address. And as we know, the food system is a complex web of activities involving the production, processing, transport, and consumption. So issues concerning the food system include governance and economics of food production, its sustainability, the degree to, for example, we waste food, how food production affects the natural environment, and the impact of food on individuals and the population health. It has been widely agreed that due to this complexity and multidimensionality of food systems, applying a food systems approach and making efforts to transform our food systems is a key accelerator to achieve the SDGs. So why do I talk about this on a webinar with land banking? So what has this to do with the topic, and why is this topic so extremely important in that context? Recently, the CFS, so the Committee of World Food Security, has negotiated the voluntary guidelines of sustainable food systems and nutrition. And amongst one of the 5 main categories and related drivers which impact the functionality of food systems and their ability to deliver also healthy diets is, of course, the land tenure. So land management, sustainable land management is a key element of the food system, and the land management has economic, environmental, and social dimensions. This has been also very clearly laid out in the voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests in the context of national food security. So the VGTTs, as we call them, clearly indicate the importance of access to land and land tenure rights. So land management instruments such as the land banking and then also land consolidation have, if they are applied in a cross-sectoral and in an integrated approach, strong potential to significantly contribute making the food systems more sustainable and therefore also a significant contribution to the poverty reduction in rural areas. So I think it's a clear contribution to the SDG 1, reducing poverty, as poverty in this case is clearly indicated and having a relation to the access of land. But it's not only the poverty issue, it's also to increase productivity of agriculture, and therefore has a clear linkage to the SDG 2, zero hunger. I would also, and I'm not going to talk about all the SDGs, which is going to contribute, but of course, the SDG 5 related to women's equal access to land is also really quite important here, making the bridge in terms of land management, land banking instruments, which really facilitate the access to land also for such specific groups. The COVID in 2020 has really further emphasized the need in many countries to strengthen also local food production, to make the farm system also more competitive, improving the farm structure and utilizing, for example, also suitable agricultural land. We have several countries of the region where many hectares are still unutilized. So bringing them into production is probably also an effort, which is the lessons learned out of the pandemic. And supporting smallholders, family farms, and youth is, of course, one of the key priorities of FAO in the region. So the development of the small farms into commercial family farms is a key objective for the land consolidation work, which we as organization are facilitating in the region. The target use of land banking or land consolidation can really allow governments to provide access to additional land to the owners of small family farms and to the young farmers. And so I'm very much welcome you to have a very intensive discussion today at this webinar on such an interesting dimension and an interesting instrument like land banking. So with this, I wish you a very good discussion and a successful seminar. Thank you very much. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Raymond, for setting the scene for the discussion. Let me now quickly introduce the program of the webinar, and I will also give a quick technical introduction to European land banking instruments and the work of FAO in Europe and Central Asia in this technical area. We will have two panel discussions today, and I will present the panel members before each panel. The first panel will focus on Western European experiences with land banking and also on the need for land banking in countries in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. After the first panel, Thomas Vasinskas, the main author, will briefly present the main findings of the land banking study with focus on the key recommendations. We have shared in advance a document that is a brief version of the study report, and we welcome your comments both in the chat and by email to Thomas by the end of the day. The email address to Thomas is in the brief document, and we also write it again in the chat. After the introduction by Thomas, we will have a second panel, which will focus on the suggested key recommendations in the study. We will begin the second panel with one round of pre-prepared questions to the panel members, but the rest of the discussion will be based on the questions and comments that you as an audience will provide us with. So please use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask the questions that you would want me to ask to the panel members in the second panel. You are also invited to use the chat function in Zoom. Please use this for general posts and also for the comments and suggested key recommendations related to the study. And we aim to finish at 12 o'clock Central European time today. This webinar is broadcasted live on the YouTube channel, and the recorded video will also be available afterwards. Let me now quickly give a short technical introduction to land banking. Many countries in Western Europe have a long tradition for applying land banking instruments as part of an active land policy. Until a few decades ago, around the 1980s, land banking was mainly an instrument to support agricultural development, often combined with improvement of agricultural infrastructure and often implemented together with land consolidation projects. Today, in most of the countries in Western Europe, land banking has, together with the land consolidation instruments in the same countries, a multi-purpose objective supporting agriculture and rural development, but also contributing to the implementation of public objectives and projects related to nature, environment, climate change, adaptation and mitigation, and also to large-scale infrastructure. Now, what does land banking mean in practice? There are different functions that we have identified based on the study. First, we have the classical land banking function, which is the acquisition and sale of parcels of agricultural land from and to private landowners. This is often combined with land consolidation, where land banking can increase the land mobility in the land consolidation planning process and provide also the land that is needed to enlarge farms and to take agricultural land out of production for the mentioned public purpose projects, and to compensate the farmers in other land and not to destroy the farms that are affected by these projects. Second, we have identified the land bank function that we call intermediation of lease of agricultural land between the owners that are not using their land and active local farmers. Third function of land banking that we have identified based on the study is the active use of the public-owned agricultural land, again as part of an active land policy, for example, providing access to additional land to small family farms or to farms owned by young farmers. The fourth and final of the functions we have found is to integrate the privatization of state-owned agricultural land, again with the aim of contributing to public purpose objectives, and this can then also be part of the function of a land bank. While several countries in Central and Eastern Europe, the Western Balkans, and in Caucasus have made good progress with land consolidation in the last decade, until recently there was not much success with land banking. This has, however, changed in the last couple of years, and we see now a renewed interest in land banking instruments. FAO is now either implementing or preparing projects with land banking elements in countries such as Armenia, Azerbaijan, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Turkey. And we will hear about some of these experiences in these countries in the first panel after my introduction. The need for land banking in these countries is driven either by a need to support the introduction of land consolidation, building up operational national land consolidation programs, or by a political wish to combat excessive land abandonment. In countries such as Armenia and North Macedonia, more than 1/3 of all arable agricultural land is unutilized at the moment. And some of these countries, they have both of these two drivers at the same time. Land banking can be an important and efficient instrument in the land management policy toolbox, with functions depending on the local needs and priorities. Now, with this technical introduction, let us move to our first panel discussion on the potential of land banking in Eastern Europe and Central Asia based on Western European good practice. In this panel, we will have with us 5 panel members. We will have Frank van Holst. Frank is the program manager of RVO, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. We have Loïc Jégousseau from SAFER in France. We have Katja Dels, head of international department of the BVVG in Germany. We have Metin Türker, deputy Director General at the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry in Turkey. And we have finally Rahela Nisavic, head of department in the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Water Management in Montenegro. Now let me begin by turning first to the Netherlands, a country with a long land banking tradition. Frank, how is land banking applied in the Netherlands, and what are the objectives, and how is it linked with other land management instruments?
Good morning, Morten, thank you. And good morning to all participants. I've seen many familiar names in the attendee list, so that's always nice to see you or to witness you. I will briefly discuss a model of land banking performed for a very long time in the Netherlands and executed by BBL, the National Land Bank. I think that this model is the most relevant for this broader group. Land banking in the Netherlands supports multi-purpose objectives like agricultural restructuring, improvement of water management, nature protection, outdoor recreation, let's say the broad integrated approach as we have discussed for many times in the Land Net. Land banking supports this kind of integrated projects on a project basis. So right from the moment that a project is identified and even before the preparation has started, the land bank will start to be operational on the land market and buy land which is available in that project area and build up a stock of land to be used later on in the project itself. For example, by widening a road, for making a buffer zone for nature protection, for the actual process of facilitating the exchange of parcels, but also to enlarge farms. So the land bank buys, it temporarily manages, and it sells as part of the land reallotment plan. The function is executed by the organization who also executed the land consolidation program. So these lines were very short. And even the director of the land consolidation service was the director of the land bank. But there was a separate legal entity for the land acquisition. So fully integrated in the land consolidation organization, but with a separate legal entity for land transactions. It functioned in a way that we had many people in the field being active, let's say, of buying and evaluating and closing transactions, guided by personnel in the office with dedicated staff, let's say, who know about land banking, who know about land markets and land acquisitions. And whenever in a project area we could buy land, we would do that if we thought it would be a good land to buy. Up to 1 million could be decided by the director of the service, and larger than that, they had to be approved by the ministry. There was a supervising board of the land bank, which is also very broad, with several ministries in it, and also the umbrella organizations for nature protection, for water management, for outdoor recreation. So a very broad supervision board. Each year, the land bank would make a monitoring report where you could see what land was bought and sold, and whether it did not distort the market prices. So all the transactions of the land bank were compared by the other transaction in the particular area. Sometimes it could go up to 25% of the transactions in rural areas where the land bank was involved. So that mechanism was very important. Last to mention is that it had a kind of revolving fund mechanism. So no other budget than available from selling parcels, buying, was the mechanism of the land bank. I think my time is done. So back to Morten.
Thank you very much, Frank. Yeah, Frank explained quite well how land banking is applied in the Netherlands. Now I will turn to France, a country with a unique regulation of the agricultural land market. And please, let's try to keep it to 3 minutes in this first round. Loïc, how in brief is land banking applied in France in the context of land market regulation, and how has it been linked with agriculture and rural development?
Thank you, Morten. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain how things work in France. French land banking has been implemented by SAFER since the 1960s, and from the very beginning, it has been linked to land market regulation. So I'll try to explain what is the French regulation of land markets, and then we'll see how land banking works. So the French regulation can be divided into 3 steps: transparency, control, and allocation. The 2 main aims of this regulation is to keep prices connected to an economic reality and prevent speculation. And the broader objective is to guarantee access to land in favor of employment, diversity of productions, added value, protection of environment within our rural territories in France. In that matter, SAFER acts for agriculture, but also more widely for rural development as a whole. The 3 steps of the French regulation of land markets I've already said them. The first one is transparency, that is to say, the knowledge of sales of rural real estate and share deals. There is a legal obligation for notaries to give this information to SAFER. This very first step allows the second one, which is control. That is to say, the capacity for SAFER to stop a certain kind of sales through our preemption rights based on legal motives. For instance, if a sale is concluded with a price considered too high in comparison with prices in the local area, SAFER can stop the price or buy the land to a lower price if the seller agrees. And the third step of French regulation is allocation, that is to say, the distribution of land towards projects in compliance with public policies. And we can implement this through either land banking or lease intermediation. So what is, how do we do land banking in France? It's as you said, it's very common to other countries. First, SAFER can buy land. Last year, for instance, they bought 100,000 hectares, which is roughly 25% of what they could have bought on the last year's market. Then SAFER can store land. Currently, we have 40,000 hectares in stock. This enables SAFER to wait, for instance, for a farmer to complete his education before he's sold the land. And then we sell the land. So there is a public announcement. The price is made according to local references. And the candidate is chosen through criteria which must comply with criteria of public policies. And who makes the choice? It's a representative from the whole rural world, farmers' unions, local authorities, environment protection unions, banks, and so on. And so we act for agriculture. For instance, last year we settled 1,400 young farmers. A lot of them were not from an agriculture background. So I'll try and keep it short and be able to answer your questions if you wish. Thank you. Over to you, Morten.
Thank you very much for sharing the interesting French experiences, Louis. Now, the situation in the eastern part of Germany in relation to land management and privatization of state-owned agricultural land is very specific and in some ways similar to some of the countries in Eastern Europe, where also a substantial share of agricultural land is still owned by the state. Katja, let me turn to you. What is the policy behind the privatization of state agricultural land and the development of the agricultural land market in the eastern part of Germany?
Thank you, Morten, for giving me the floor. Hi to everyone. I remember we talked about land banking in a workshop in Thunder in 2004. That's quite a long while ago. And we still talk about land banking. This shows how important the issue is. I will try to make a long story short. Morten mentioned the situation in Germany regarding privatization of state-owned land is related to the history of Germany, to reunification, and the situation after 1990 in East Germany. We had a big stock of state-owned land, which then was meant to be brought back into private hands. That was the policy. This happened in 3 steps. First, a leasing phase, then a land purchase program to reduce prices, and then selling the remaining land at market value. The leasing phase was more or less a phase that gave Germany the chance to develop what policy aims actually were supposed to be pursued with the privatization, and to keep the agricultural sector in Eastern Germany running at the same time, to prevent the sector of breaking down. And that happened, that worked quite well. Excuse me. If we talk about the main policy, we have to look at the second phase, which is the land purchase program I mentioned, based on the Indemnification and Compensation Act that was released in Germany. And the aim of that law first was actually an objective also of justice, to allow former owners to buy back their land at reduced prices, or their former land, parts of their former land at reduced prices, and at the same time to give East German citizens who wanted to get engaged in farming the possibility to build up farm businesses. This land purchase program was then widened because of EU objections. It had to be open for all lessees who held a long-term lease contract with BVVG. And this led, and that was also one of the main objectives, I would say we followed in this privatization, led to a heterogenic ownership and farm structure in East Germany. We are now in the third phase where we sell off remaining land, and I will come back to that also. If we talk about policy objectives, of course, we are privatizing since almost 30 years. So new policy objectives actually came along. One was, for example, environmental objectives to keep some of the land in our portfolio as environmentally valuable in the stock, in the public land stock. And this land was then transferred from BVBG without charge to respective agencies that take care of these environmental lands on the federal states level. If we come to the second question regarding what was the policy behind land market development, I would say that we were not really involved in policy making of developing the land market, but due to the fact that BVBG, a state agency holding this large land stock and providing it step by step on the market, we were one of the biggest players on the market, and that of course influenced and triggered land market development in the 90s and in the 2000s. We now have the discussion, and that is quite recent, that we see on the land market, and Loic has just mentioned the topic that we have more and more land concentration in fewer hands, and that is something where policy wants to regulate a little bit. So this is the current discussion in Germany, how this can be regulated, and it influences us as BVBG by new regulations that have been agreed upon between federal states and the federation, to gradually to make, for example, the tender lots that we tender smaller, and also to provide land through restricted tender to certain groups, for example, young farmers or labor-intensive farm enterprises. I think this is enough for the time being. I give back the word to Morten. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Katja. We have now heard the experiences briefly explained from the Netherlands, from France, and from Germany. And let me now turn to Metin Türker. Metin, you're the Deputy Director General in the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry in Turkey. And Turkey has the largest national land consolidation program in the region. What is the background for the strong interest of Turkey now also to develop a land banking instrument? And how do you what do you want to achieve with it? Please unmute Metin.
He is now muted.
Metin, you are muted.
Yes. Thank you very much for this panel, because this panel is very important for me and for my colleagues, that we are working on land banking activities. But why we are insisting land banking? I would like to answer these questions, some figures. I suppose I will give some information in the Turkish agricultural sector's characteristics. You know, Turkey is a high agricultural potential, 24 million hectares, agricultural lands, 15 million hectares we have pasture grassland, and at the same time 2 million hectares agricultural treasure lands. Different lands types, and these are managed different institutions. As a all of them are agricultural lands. We have 3 million agricultural holdings, but 19 Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes,
Can
we
you-
hear you now.
What's happened?
We heard the figures.
Okay. In other words, farm scale is small, and ownership problems are high level. Because of over fragmentation, approximately 2 million hectares abandoned land because of over fragmentation. You know that we accelerated land consolidation projects after 2005. After that, we started to multi-purpose and basin-based land consolidation projects. In 7 years, we had a good land consolidation and multi-purpose land consolidation projects, because our aim was to arrange fragmented, unshaped parcels and to provide for public investment, such as irrigation projects, transportation project, etc. In terms of multi-purpose land consolidation project. Yes, we had a good pattern. We were success in this implementation. But in 2010 or 11, we recognized that only land consolidation project isn't solution for farmers. That's why we have to find a new solutions like land banking and etc. Because these problems lead to another problems. For example, in rural areas, land not enough for farmers. In 2014, we decided by selling some norm below the norm land. We calculated undivisible lands, city-based, and from now on in 2014, fragmentation by inheritance was forbidden. Okay, good. But what will we do next steps? In accordance to latest data, 1.6 million hectares agricultural land have been prevented by from being fragmented by inheritance and selling. Good. What will we do from now on? We need new implementations. In fact, some rules is related to land banking in law, okay, but it is not sufficient, because in the current law, everything is based on voluntary incentives and sanctions, and new management, monetary financial arguments are not sufficient. Land sales take place in the free market, but small, fragmented, and problematic lands are not sold. Nobody wants to buy these parcels. We couldn't realize land banking implementation completely. We know also it is not easy. Then we've focused on new solutions. For example, transfer of property rights to actual users couldn't be achieved adequately due to legal, financial, and administrative deficiencies. Yeah. Unfortunately, we haven't been successful in the application until today. Yes, we are making something, but it isn't enough. We have to establish new system. We have to be realized new instruments under the land banking systems.
Thank you very much, Metin. We will come back to what you plan to do more in detail in the next question. I think for me, this is a very interesting example, what we see from Turkey, where we have both of the two drivers that I mentioned in the introduction. We have the need to support the land consolidation. The land banking will allow to enlarge the farms, which is also the objective of the government in Turkey, that the farms will become bigger and more competitive. At the same time, it also has the objective of bringing abandoned land back into production. So we have both the drivers at the same time in Turkey. Let me now turn to Montenegro. Rahela, you represent the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Water Management. And FAO is currently supporting Montenegro with improved management of the state agricultural land. How do you see that the active management of state land in the future can contribute to agricultural and rural development and better provide access to land for small farms, to young farmers, or to other target groups?
Thank you, Morten. I would also like to thank FAO for inviting me to take part in this webinar today. And I would like to greet all the participants. In 1992, Montenegro adopted the law on agricultural land with provisions for land consolidation. However, a land consolidation program was never introduced. The Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Water Management is looking for possibilities to revise this law or adopt a new law, which is considered obsolete and no longer corresponding to realities. Particularly, broader policy and the institutional framework governing land domain require better alignment with the development goals and strategic objectives of the government. Excessive fragmentation of both land ownership and land use exists, and it's related to the farm structure prior to the Second World War, which still exists to a larger degree, particularly fragmented parcels, rather than as a result of the restitution process here in Montenegro. Active management of the state land will enable creation of mechanisms that would assist small agricultural holdings to grow and expand the possibility of their association and joint action, which will, as previously mentioned, enable them to be more competitive on the agricultural market. Responsible, systematic approach to land issue will continue investments in the development of villages, especially to continue activities of infrastructure construction in rural areas. It is also important to mention how it can affect academia Academia shall provide more in-depth research on integrated land use planning, both urban and rural. And academia shall carry out research and comparative analysis of land governments, which would be muchly appreciated. Also, a graduate course in land management shall need to be developed, which is not present right now. Active management of the state land in the future will depend on improved land policies, complementing broader development goals and programmatic implementation of land management instruments, facilitating improvement of farm structures, enhances livelihoods and rural development. As you have previously mentioned, I wanted also to note that, which is important to mention, that FAO is assisting Montenegro here with an ongoing project, support the development of land policy and land management instruments in support of smallholders, whose conclusions and recommendations we shall see in the upcoming year when the project is about to be finished in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rahela. And now let's move into the second round with the first panel. And please, if you could try to be a little bit shorter in your answers in the second round. Let me come back to you, Frank. How do you see, with your experience from working on introduction of both land consolidation and land banking instruments in the Western Balkans and the Caucasus countries, how do you see the potential for land banking in these countries in general?
Well, I see a great need for land banking, a great potential, but also huge challenges. And well, let's start with the need. To be honest, I can't, in many countries, I can't imagine how the issue of farm structures could be solved without a land bank. Because if we talk about Armenia, for example, 1.48 hectares average farm size. If we talk about North Macedonia, 1.5 hectares average farm size. And well, these are quite extreme figures, and without, let's say, major increase on land mobility, these problems will not be solved. We can solve with land consolidation, as Metin says. You can solve the internal structure of the farms, but you cannot, you will not automatically enlarge farms. And I think that's the huge challenge, and that's the powerful combination of the two, land consolidation and land banking. You can both solve the internal fragmentation and start to enlarge farms. There's also potential in the fact that in quite some countries there's still a lot of state land available, so these could maybe be moved to a more dynamic land bank than being managed as a static state reserve. So there's also potential there. I think the huge challenge is the organizational part. I have been involved in interventions in, for example, in Lithuania, in Croatia. Also, we've seen developments in Hungary at the time that when you start talking about a land bank, people start to talk about huge organizations, and the organizational discussion comes first instead of the functional discussion. So maybe we should try to introduce land banking in another way and build this up very gradually and start in a few land consolidation projects to appoint staff with the typical task of doing the land banking, arrange minimal legal arrangements in the law so that you can do this, so land can be handed over from the state reserve to the land bank, and start from that part to work gradually and build up at the end an organization which will do the land banking, but not start a discussion from the other way around. What organization do we need? Okay, I'll try to keep it short. So back to Morten.
Thanks a lot, Frank. Now, Loïc, in France, you practice also the variation of land banking that we call lease mediation. Could you please let us know what is the objective of the lease mediation instrument that you practice and how is it actually functioning?
Yes, So before getting into proper lease intermediation, I would like to stress two other mechanisms implemented by SAFER. The first one is, there was a question in the chat. It's the possibility for SAFER to lease the land they own in their stock during the 5-year period of possible ownership by SAFER. SAFER can rent this land through temporary lease contracts. And this mechanism makes it possible for a tenant, which is selected after public announcement, to take care of the parcels and preserve their quality until they are eventually sold by SAFER. So that's the first mechanism, very short-term lease within the land banking process. The second mechanism is also a short-term mechanism implemented by SAFER, but it concerns lands which remains property of private or public owners. It's not land owned by SAFER, it's property of public or private owners. A contract is signed between an owner and a SAFER, and then there is a lease signed between SAFER and a tenant after public announcement. So why do we do this? I will give you two examples. For instance, if a private owner loses his farmer because, for instance, he retires, he can ask SAFER to find a farmer, because maybe he would try to find a new farmer, or maybe he would like to sell his land. He needs time. So while he thinks about his project, he can ask SAFER to find a farmer. So that's for private owners. And for public owners, for instance, there can be local authorities who stock land because they have this project of housings. So before this project is eventually done, the local authority can ask SAFER to find a farmer, and so the land is farmed, and agriculture can be done on this land until the project of housings is executed. But in both cases, private or public, this land remains property of these owners. So, and the third mechanism, which is a very long-term leases. This is what we call proper lease intermediation. SAFER does not sign leases with tenants, but merely makes an owner and a tenant meet. So how does this work? And I'll try to keep it short. Why do we do this? These mechanisms is very, very useful to facilitate the transmission of farms as a whole, because mainly in the north of France, a farmer owns part of the land, but he rents the other parts of the land. So when he retires, he wants to transmit the whole farm. He will sell his part, but on the part which he rents, he doesn't have the main control. So that's what we do, what SAFER do. The living farmer will ask SAFER to find a new farmer, and the SAFER will find a farmer after public announcement, but will also contact the owner or the several owners of the farmer so that they agree to sign a new lease or new leases to the new farmer. So there is really this intermediation, so that the seller, the farmer which retires, can sell the whole farm. The new farmer receives the very same farm as the former farmer, which is viable. And the owners sign new deals because they don't want to sell their land. They want to keep leasing their land. And so they keep receiving the rent. So this is very, very useful. And try to keep it short. This is very useful in France because, like in many other countries, there is a wave of farmers who will retire in the next 10 years. So there is a real need for the farm to keep it, to keep the farms as a whole and to be transmitted and to be able to settle young farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louis. Katja, in East Germany, you are at the same time applying a number of different programs related to land privatization and land management. And I saw some questions in the chat also around this. But could you tell us what is the linkage between the land privatization process, where BVG is the responsible public agency, and the land management instruments such as land banking and land consolidation applied by the German lands? And please try to keep it a bit short.
I try my best. Thank you, Morten. Yes, maybe difficult to understand. BVVG holds federal assets on the federal level, and then again, due to the federal structure we have in Germany, we also have agencies that are responsible for land issues on the federal states level. And they are actually the agencies that maybe in your respective firm sort of take over the assignments regarding land banking, because they actually also purchase land, lease out land in order to improve the agricultural structure in the federal states. They are also involved in infrastructure projects and land consolidation. So these are two different assignments we are talking about. And on federal level, if we come to privatization, we do it the way I mentioned before. The linkages are, there are a few linkages in terms of not working together, but how we are actually linked to the land agencies. One is that BVVG, as sort of in, for example, in land consolidation projects in the federal states, BVVG, if it holds land in the respective area, takes part in the procedures just as every private landowner does. But there's one linkage. There's another linkage we have that is the assignment of the land agencies in the federal states have. They implement the so-called land law on land turnover, which means that they can execute a preemption right on behalf of the federal states when, for example, there is a farmer in need for additional land, then they execute this preemption right by stepping into a contract. Also, for example, a contract that BVVG has negotiated with a private buyer. They step into this contract at the same price and buy the land and then resell it to the farmer. So this is a sort of an instrument the federal states have, and that also influences then contracts BVVG has negotiated. One more thing, the federal states agency, the land agencies, they have bought land from BVVG out of its portfolio to use it in order to implement the Water Framework Directive of the EU. So this is the interlinkage, but this land was not transferred for free, but the federal states had to buy it. This is due to the federal structure that we have in Germany. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katja. Now, Metin, let me come back to Turkey. You have plans to quickly scale up the land banking instrument that is still under development to a countrywide approach. How do you plan to finance it, and how do you plan to institutionally organize land banking activities? And please try to be brief. Thank you. You are muted. Please unmute.
Okay. In order to solve land banking problems, activities problems, one of them is the monetary finance problems. By means of land banking implementation, our aim is to solve property problems, to expand the scale of farm, to carry out land consolidation projects, to rent, to lend or to lease the abandoned land, and to evaluate agricultural, etc. These activities, for these activities, we need finance. Nowadays, we are working on new land banking legislation, draft legislation, and is ready. At the same time, we are working on land banking activities, credit or finance models. Different financing tools have been proposed in the new land banking draft study. These are allocation from the general budget. Very important, because you have to fulfill land consolidation project, for example. Other profit to be obtained from the revolving fund activities. Another finance research commission fee from the sale and rentals, maybe land donations, incomes from the stocks, land sales, and we are considering that maybe we can offer 40% of all treasury lands to sale and lease leasing incomes, maybe. This, in fact, land banking activities and financing can be classified 3 groups. One, first is financing of public investment. For these investments should be financed by the state. Second group related to institutional financing. This institution needs some finance, personal, building, equipment, etc. These expenses should be taken from the general budget, and some of them should be taken from the activities. Maybe we should discuss. The last model, maybe financing of beneficiaries and landowners. Incentive and support budget should be determined in the participatory management. Okay. We are working on these models.
Thank you very much, Metin. We have heard how the countries have good experiences with land banking, including with land management instruments, including with land banking. Now back to you, Rahela. How do you hope to see the development in Montenegro related to improved land management in the next 10 years?
Thank you. In order to have improved land management and land banking as well, I hope that the current legal and institutional framework governing land domain will be revised much sooner than in 10 years' time, and that Montenegro will have clearly defined and organized, as Frank mentioned, authority responsible for the management of agricultural land in state ownership, including municipalities, which would be Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Water Management, which shall be responsible for land management instruments. Also, given the characteristics and importance of agricultural land for the development of our national economy, this legal framework should be separated from other land in state ownership. That implies that all procedures, above all sale and lease procedures of agricultural land, should be regulated by a specific law, which I mentioned in my previous talking. This development will spur and support the development of growing smallholders and family farms. Furthermore, I hope that in 10 years' time, we will see digitalization of agriculture be more present and used. In the domain of land management, this can fasten and enhance procedures we have today and improve monitoring of leased land. This will lead to better monitoring whether the agricultural production on public soil is sustainably used, and we can follow up on the ecological balance not to be harmed and prevent degradation of soil. Among other important benefits, digitalization of agricultural production will address mismanagement of agricultural soil, as I mentioned, with inadequate crop cultivation, over-fertilization, diminished productivity rates, degradation, and soil erosion. The integration of information and communication technologies in agricultural production today for us plays a key role in the development of sustainable agriculture industry. Anyhow, it's necessary for us to aspire and establish a separate record in the foreseeable future that would contain only data referring to agricultural land in state ownership, and that is something that we are actively doing even today. I think it's necessary to continue and aspire, create such a system of keeping records that would in each moment provide accurate data concerning all characteristics of agricultural land, in terms of location, size, culture, and value, and that would ease and enable us to implement more organized land banking methods. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahela. And also let me thank all of the panelists in the first panel for this very interesting discussion. Thanks a lot. Now we move to the presentation of the findings from the study. I will invite Tomas Veršinskas to briefly present the main findings of the FAO study on good European land banking practices, and in particular highlight the main policy recommendations related to land banking. We have in advance shared with all of you the brief document that we have prepared as the basis for the discussion today, and we have also shared a link to the document now in the chat. If you have comments both to the presentation of Thomas or to the suggested key recommendations in the brief, then please write them now in the chat or send them to Thomas by email by the end of today. And as I mentioned in the introduction, the email address is in the brief document. And finally, and this is important, if you have questions to Thomas and the other members of the second panel, then please write them in the Q&A function in Zoom now, or while Thomas is presenting. This will be then used as the basis for the discussion that we will have in the second panel. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Morten. Hello, everyone. I will immediately share my screen. Time is short. I was given 15 minutes, so I will try to do it in a record time of 12 minutes, but let us see. So thank you for having me here, and it's my pleasure to discuss now about land banking with so many experts in the field, and especially that I also see people from countries we have worked in, and starting from the west to the east. And I think I would like to start this presentation by recalling that recently FAO has presented a land consolidation guide, and now it's for me it's a connecting of dots. And now we move to land banking, and all this comes from practice that we have experienced in countries, in FAO program countries, and in the countries that we work in. Even in my own country, Lithuania, where I am from. So I am Tomas Veršinskas, and I would like to present you now the key findings of the study and focus on the recommendations of the study on land banking. And as you can see here, is my screen?
Please switch to the full screen mode.
Yes. So
that the participants can better see the slides. Thanks a lot.
Now?
It's perfect now. Thanks.
Actually, this comes, as I have mentioned, from the practice in the field. We saw with land consolidation that there was a lack of a comprehensive document that we could share with the country representatives. And actually, it was a feeling that the information is scattered in different documents, and it is difficult to work without a clear understanding what land consolidation is and what land banking is. So I think about land banking, there is even less information available. So we tried to map the situation in Western Europe and Central Europe and see how these practices, best practices, could be applied in FAO program countries. And the objective of the study, it's defined here in nice words, but as I have mentioned, we see a need actually in order to share information and spread it. We see a need to first have a comprehensive document which would where people could consult about the best practices and see what would be the feasibility to adapt in their respective country. Because as we could see from the practice of Central European countries that Morten has mentioned, it's not the very easy way and a very easy way to implement this instrument immediately. So as to the methodology, this study started with a desk research, and we had performed consultations with key persons in all the analyzed countries. And we have analyzed countries in Western Europe to identify the best practice of land banking, and also we have covered some of the Central European countries to see what we have advancements in land banking, namely in Hungary, Lithuania, Poland, and Croatia. And as from the western part of Europe, we have analyzed Denmark, France, Germany, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern land, the Netherlands, and Spain, Galicia. So we have now we will have hopefully the feedback, and also I would like to thank immediately those who have already provided feedback on the brief that we have distributed. So your comments will be taken into account, and the study will be finalized. As Morten has already mentioned, there's even no need to say that land banking is widely used in Western Europe, and with a wave of land consolidation coming to Central Europe, it was hoped that land banking will come along. But strangely, this didn't happen, and we will see some root causes of that later on. So what we also identified is that different land banking functions are applied by different land banks in different countries. As Morten has enumerated these functions, some countries focus on lease intermediation, some countries focus on purchase and sale and management, interim management of agricultural land, while as we could see, some countries combine these instruments in one, as was explained in France, for example. So this set of instruments should be chosen by a country taking into account their respective situation. And now we in the countries where we work, we see the situation is different, and the relevant tools should be selected. So unfortunately, what we can see, this land banking instrument didn't follow land consolidation that easily into Central Europe. And what we can see is that there was the main deficiency why it didn't perform. It was a lack of clear and sustainable policy and political support for that. Of course, agricultural land is one of the fundamental resources. So no wonder that it is well, land banking involves certain risks, and respective safeguards should be adopted. But apparently, it was a lack of support on a political level, because on technical level, some of the Central European countries, like Lithuania, for example, I think are one step from launching a true land banking, but this step should be done. Yet to come. So the need for land banking in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, as Morten has already mentioned, we saw while communicating with representatives of these countries that there is a renewed interest and understanding that land consolidation should be combined with other instruments, and namely land banking. And also this land banking would support land consolidation and also allow combat excessive land abandonment. So as a result of a study, and also combining the results of a study with our land consolidation guides, this chapter on land banking, we suggested a definition of land banking, because if you Google now and for land banking, you will find a bunch of different concepts what could be considered as land banking. So here we tried to define that this is purely public purpose instrument and with a systematic approach, and applied by a public institution, having public objectives, etc. So for trying to attain these objectives that were identified by Morten as well, since we move from pure agricultural development to a broader scope, a multi-purpose instrument. So you are very welcome to comment on the definition, provide the comments, send to my email, which is indicated in my presentation as well. All your remarks are welcome, and we will take into account the ideas you suggest. Of course, we definitely have to know why we apply this land banking and what type of objectives it would help us to attain and to aim. And these were enumerated by Morten as well. And as to the functions of the land banks, we have identified, as Morten has already mentioned in his introductory speech, these two key instruments, two key functions that afterwards are followed or may be followed by some accessory functions, which you would be able to read about in more detail in the study document itself. But of course, the key instrument is acquisition, intermediary management, and sale or exchange of land. And the second one is facilitation of lease of agricultural land. And then we have accessory functions like active management of state-owned land to support relevant policies, like young farmers, for example. And of course, we hardly imagine not having a link between land banking, land consolidation, and state-owned land privatization. So these should be interconnected. We also have identified some criteria, some concepts that we would like to recommend. One of them is, this also comes from our experience of the work in FAO program countries, that it should be understood that land banking should be focused and focused on project areas. If we speak about acquisition and intermediary management, sale and exchange of land, because we had some suggestions that the state should buy here and there randomly the land, but it would not lead to a result, obviously, since our resources are limited, and therefore we suggest, at least in the beginning, to clearly focus on intervention areas. While another core instrument, which is lease intermediation, we consider that this could be applied on a scale of the whole country, and we could see it from Galician example in Spain, for example, where you can access their website and see what land is available for lease, etc. Also, what we learned, and this was I would say, a key lesson from Galicia and Spain, that land banking should be driven by demand. It should be demand driven. For example, if this land management tool is applied and in 10 years, let's say there was a land consolidation project involving land banking, and in 10 years we can see that the land is abandoned again, that means that there was no demand for such a project. So this should be carefully evaluated before investing in it, and beneficiaries should be also identified, public beneficiaries or private beneficiaries, so that no investment should be wasted. And as I have mentioned already, this integration with other land management tools or other tools like privatization or relevant instruments is the key, because if we apply them separately, this will give us a low effect. As regards the regulatory framework, we have identified that in most cases, land banking is not regulated by a separate law, as it is the case in many countries regarding land consolidation. So often land banking regulations are integrated into specific laws, like law on agricultural land, for example, or law on land consolidation, like in Denmark. And actually, this will depend a lot on the form which is selected by the country, on the form of the land bank and institutional infrastructure as well, because we could see, and this is presented in the study as well, that the land bank may have different various legal forms, like let's say ranging from the agency under the ministry and to the state enterprise, etc. So, of course, depending on this legal form selected by the country, the regulatory framework will depend, and we will see how, for example, the budgeting and activities of the functions of a land bank are regulated. So it will be one case if it's a state agency, and another case if it's a state enterprise, of course. And regarding the adoption of a legal framework, we always promote this model that once the legal framework is elaborated and adopted, it should be tested in pilots and then amended if necessary before scaling up land banking activities. And as regards the land bank itself, the key messages would be that actually land bank, since it acts in the land market, and other participants act in the land market, it should be availed to take rapid decisions. Of course, thresholds, certain thresholds should be in place, which would limit powers probably of decision making of a land bank. But these thresholds should be high, and decisions could be made rapidly without a need for approval from the ministry or even from the government. So this should be a flexible and rapid mechanism to be able to act in the land market. And the land bank should have a revolving budget and not depend on a state budget every year, so that it could reinvest the incomes from the land banking activities into the land banking activities again, because the land bank may acquire land, let's say, when the situation is favorable in a certain area or in the country, in the market, and not depend on a state budget, which would be calculated each year. And of course, a supervision and regulatory and system of safeguards would be in place, and supervision would be performed in our ways by a relevant ministry, like the Ministry of Agriculture, for example. To launch the activities of the land bank, it should be provided, of course, with a startup assets. So either land or funds, as Morten has mentioned and other participants have mentioned. Many countries still have large reserves of state-owned land. So why wouldn't such land be used as a launching platform for a land bank, for land banking activities? And in the very beginning of these activities, at least the basic cost should be funded from state budget, because of course it will not function on a self-financing basis immediately. Although self-financing should be as a target for land bank, and this activity shouldn't then demand additional funding from the state budget unless there is a specific need for it. So thank you very much. I hope I was short enough. Please write all your comments regarding the brief to this email, and I thank you in advance for your suggestions. Thank you, Morten. Over to you. You are muted.
Morten, you're muted.
Can't hear you.
Sorry for this. I hope you can hear me now. Thanks a lot, Thomas, for this presentation of the land banking study and its draft, the key recommendations. This has now set the scene for our second panel discussion, I hope. And here we will focus on the study and on the key recommendations that it provides. Let me introduce the panel members that we will have in the second panel. First, we will have Ramona Diminiciu. Ramona is representing the European coordination via Campesina and Eco Ruralis, and Ramona is also a peasant from Romania, so representing the civil society perspective. We also have with us Marije Lopsma. Marije is the chair of FIG Commission 8 and also representing Dutch Cadastre. We have Kristina Mitic-Artova. Kristina is the team leader of the ongoing FAO mainland land consolidation project in North Macedonia. And finally, Thomas Vasinskas will also be in the second panel to address questions from the audience. Let us begin with a quick round of questions to the panelists while we take your last questions. So again, please add them to the Q&A function that we have in Zoom. And again, comments and to the key recommendations in the chat. So I will begin with Ramona, and you represent, as I mentioned, the civil society perspective. How do you see that we can support small family farms and young farmers with these land management instruments, including the land banking that we have discussed today, and what are the policy aspects in your view?
Thank you so much, Morten, and thank you to all the team from FAO for organizing this very important discussion on land issues, which is very, very timely and very important for us, the small farmers of Europe. So I'm very happy to present to you our perspective and our reflection on our problems of accessing land, but also on the proposal on the table for land banks. First of all, it's important to note that the small farmers, the smallholders, particularly the young peasant farmers who practice agricultural farming, are facing extreme difficulties to access land. Our region is known to have the eldest farming population in the world, and the lack of access to land for the young generation is a problem that poses at risk the actual future of farming in Europe. So this is really a terrible problem. Despite having acknowledged this problem, the support for accessing land for young farmers remains, unfortunately, a lip service paid at all levels by governments or by regional institutions. This structural problem is both the cause and the effect of an agriculture and public policies that put priority on trade and on international markets, many times, too many times, by violating human rights and to the detriment of social factors, which actually should be central in the food and agriculture domain. The problem of access to land for the young generation was built on historic inequalities that were massively ignored until now and that are being aggravated during this current crisis. It's a problem that was and continues to be addressed exclusively through pilot projects or through limited support measures for the benefit of very small numbers of farmers. The land regulation, unfortunately, remains blind to this desperate need to provide access to land for the younger generation of farmers and continues to maintain the status quo where the rich can have land while the poor cannot. Access to land without a comprehensive agrarian reform that engages the government from our entire region will actually not lead to a positive transformation for the food and agriculture sector. The lack of access to land for small, young agroecological farmers is a phenomenon that affects, as it was already said, primarily Western Europe, while in Eastern Europe, we are also confronted, we're facing land grabbing in various forms. Land grabbing that is driven by the private sector, where financial institutions play a key role. Land grabbing that is facilitated by the states through land consolidation policies and lack of support for local communities. While in Eastern Europe part, we still have public land, state-managed land. In Western Europe, the land liberalization unfortunately concentrated the land in very few hands, leaving almost no options for the young or new entrants. And so projects like land banks appear to be a solution. Based on our experience as small farmers, we believe that land banking should only be public and should be done with full consultation and involvement of small farmers and for their benefit. In Eastern Europe, through the public land that remained in the administration of the state after the fall of the communist regime, this public land has been largely concessioned to a large industrial farm. So we are reluctant to land bank projects without having clear, transparent rules that prioritize and support small farmers and local communities. Eastern European states have unfortunately also not a very good reputation in upholding real social interest, and they tend to give into vested interest of agribusiness lobby and corruption. And ultimately, public land banking, as it is organized today, has massively led to land concentration and has shut down many small family farms. We cannot stress enough the fact that land banking should be very transparent and should be very democratic. For example, in my country, Romania, this year, the Romanian government amended the agricultural land market policy to facilitate theoretically public land access to young farmers. This new measure needs to be observed in practice because most of the land, the public land, is locked into industrial mega farms due to the long-term leases. And in order to have an impact in the real life, this new measure needs to be backed by complementary measures that limit the access of the corporations to land and that offer support for smallholders to access not only land, but also other natural resources, means of production, and most importantly, the market. I would like to refer briefly to the VGGT, which clearly states that states should refrain from using land consolidation where fragmentation provides benefits, such as risk reduction of or crop diversification. This is especially important in the times of the current COVID crisis. This crisis has dramatically affected the peasant rural communities because it limited our dialogue with the authorities. It gives us limitation to access to information because of the digital communication that is being promoted right now. It has deepened the poverty and inequalities. It has deepened the social division caused by political divide between left and right political ideologies. And the acceleration of the corporate agenda for digitalization and international trade is been extremely problematic for us. We need to be extremely cautious when we promote digitalization in the food and agriculture sector because we're leaving small farmers behind. And this is not what the small farmers need. Digitalization driven by corporation can also be antisocial because it's meant for profit and it proposes to replace people with machines and with software. So VGGT gives us clear guidance that where appropriate, states may consider the establishment of land banks as part of land consolidation programs to acquire temporarily hold land parcels until they are allocated to beneficiaries. So we believe that in terms of sequencing of the process, small farmers should come first. Until small farmers and young farmers are not clearly identified in policy methodology as main and primary beneficiaries targeted by public land banks, it is premature to promote land consolidation and land banking as a viable solution. We also have other instruments like the UN Declaration for the Rights of Peasants, which provides us very useful stipulation in Article 17, which speaks about the right to land for small farmers, for peasants. We also have the UN Decade for Family Farming, which provides us across the board with very, very useful guidance on how to support access to land for small farmers, for young farmers particularly. But for us, in conclusion, the minimum requirements for respecting the local communities and for respecting the peasants' right to land by countries and by projects that support access to land, we need to have a clear overall land policy, which includes strategic vision for the future of agriculture that is created with the participation of the rural communities, with the participation of small family farms, peasants, and people working in rural areas. We need transparent and inclusive legislative processes with focus on the right holders. We need priority for young and small family farmers when state land is leased out or when it's transferred in other forms. We need a transparent land market information system that is accessible for rural communities. We need to avoid speculation in agriculture land. We need to limit the options for large corporate farms to own agricultural land. And we need clear rules against conflicts of interest that limit corruption and the influence of the corporate sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ramona, for these important points. And I see also from the questions that we are receiving that we will come back to some of these topics in the next round of discussion. Let me now turn to Maria. From the perspective of the land tenure professionals in FIG, how do you see the main challenges of building up capacity for land banking and for the other land management instruments as well?
Well, thank you, Morten. Well, I think it's a highly specialized field of expertise, and land policy is a complex discipline that requires knowledge from the land market, governance, institutions, financial arrangements, legislation, tenure systems, and real estate, among others. And also knowledge about the land policy instruments like land banking, land exchange, preemption rights, or expropriation is needed. And one needs to be able to select the appropriate instrument or set of instruments that fit the aim. Land acquisition, for example, for infrastructure might require a different approach than strengthening the agricultural sector by optimizing the allocation of land. So each instrument has its own advantages and preconditions for a successful employment. And due to the specialized nature, it is important to build sufficient capacity for land banking, but also for the whole discipline of land policy and its instruments. Overall, land banking relies on a well-functioning land market, the presence of institutions that can implement land banking policies, and a framework of good governance principles. Well, actually, as the previous speaker has touched upon. So let me explain this with an example. A land bank can only buy land if sufficient transactions take place on the land market. Without enough land being offered for sale, it is easy to disturb the land market by outcompeting local landowners or to drive up prices. So it is essential to have knowledge about the local land market to be able to determine an acquisition strategy and assess the potential of a land parcel for the purpose for which it is bought. Apart from knowledge about such local situations, it is essential that land banking is supported by principles of good governance and reliable institutions that can implement the land banking strategy. However, not all countries can rely on a long tradition in land policy and employment policy instruments, so capacity still has to be built. Apart from that, in countries where land policy and land banking has been applied, there are differences in legislation, rules and regulations, and financial arrangements, institutions, principles of governance, and tenure. So I would advise to base capacity building on two pillars. First, it is key to invest in education to build curricula. And second, to exchange experience through international networks like the FIG or LandNet and the UN. To learn from each other's land banking frameworks and mistakes and successes upon implementation that will enhance a better understanding of land banking and the conditions for an effective implementation. And I think we have seen already quite some examples in the first panel that we can learn from. So yeah, and I will open the floor after this panel also for questions to grasp the opportunity to learn more and exchange knowledge in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Now, Christina, you are the team leader of the ongoing EU-funded mainland project in North Macedonia, where FAO is supporting the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Water Economy to develop a fully operational national land consolidation program. How do you see the need for land banking in North Macedonia in support of land consolidation instrument, and also the potential of land banking beyond the land consolidation?
Thank you very much, Morten. I'm pleased to be part of this very interesting discussion. North Macedonia has come a long way since its independence with regard to shaping and improving the agricultural land policy. So in order to answer your question, I will briefly mention some of the most important steps that were undertaken so far and how gradual introduction of different land management instruments has led us to the point where we currently stand on a country level. First, North Macedonia has undertaken steps to improve the property registers and introduced the process of land restitution. These two processes were implemented almost in parallel. And after the finalization of land restitution, the state still owns more than 1/3 of the total agricultural land fund. Consequently, actions were taken to improve the management of state-owned land through introduction of instruments of long-term lease for the active farmers. Finally, land consolidation was introduced in 2012-13, and the process was piloted, the instrument was piloted until 2007. This has led us ultimately to introduction of full-fledged nationwide land consolidation program, which we are currently implementing together with the Ministry of Agriculture, and you already mentioned FAO as a technical support and finances ensured by the European Union. While land consolidation in North Macedonia was introduced with mainly agricultural objectives, we are currently piloting multi-purpose land consolidation in 2 active land consolidation projects. And this process has led us to note the important role of the state-owned land can have and should have in the land consolidation projects. First of all, acting as catalyzer to the reallotment planning, also very important for the implementation of multi-purpose land consolidation projects, and the potential the state-owned land has to enlarge the private family farms. So FAO, in parallel with supporting the land consolidation process, has been also supporting the process of sale, of privatization of the state-owned land in a targeted way, which would, of course, support the enlargement of small family farms and of the family farms and smallholders. We expect that the integration of the land management instruments that I already mentioned, like land consolidation, state-owned land privatization, long-term leasing under the umbrella of the National Agricultural Policy, will to a great extent contribute to the land market development, to combating land abandonment and empowerment of smallholders. In parallel with the activities we already have in the country, together with the national counterparts, there are discussions over related issues within the government of North Macedonia. Particularly discussions regarding the establishment of integrated land management agency, which will include land banking functions among other planned functions. To sum up, together with the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Water Economy, other international partners as well, we are really working hard to achieve an integrated, balanced, and well-functioning land policy instruments, including land banking to support the agricultural development, and of course to support smallholders and family farms in line with the objectives already set in the agricultural policy. Morten, I hope that I was brief enough to explain the effort going on in Macedonia, and I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And I think the experiences of North Macedonia illustrate very well the close relationship between the land banking and the land consolidation instrument. Now, finally, in this first round of the second panel, let me turn to you, Thomas, as the main author of the land banking study. What would you say are the 2 key recommendations on land banking that we want to bring forward based on the study?
Well, first of all, Morten, I would like to thank you for giving me an opportunity to choose 2 and not just one single key recommendation. So in any case, the first recommendation from my side, it is not written in the brief or in the presentation, but the feeling and the experience shows, at least from my side, that you cannot introduce land banking as a half instrument, because either you have a range of functions, a set of functions which would give an effect, or you just probably wasting your time if you try to limit the land bank. You know, you establish a land bank and you do not provide the land bank with relevant functions, because state-owned land and land itself is a resource with which involves a lot of interests and risks and everything. So the safeguarding system should be in place, etc. But this is a very useful instrument. So it would be a pity to waste it, introducing it half introducing and half not introducing, because this will not bring an effect, and this will ruin the image of land banking itself. So this would be my first recommendation, to elaborate carefully, to select the set of instruments and to launch it. And the second one is, of course, a systematic approach, because I think it would be the best thing, the best way to waste money if you do not do it in a systematic way. Because buying, selling randomly will not achieve to any public policy objectives. So this have to be a systematic approach. If we see a railway, a highway project coming and will be in place in 5 years, let us do land banking in this intervention or project area. So it has to be combined with other instruments and with a careful planning. So it would be useful then. These would be the two that I would prefer. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I think these are two very good points. First, that we need to go all in if we want to do land banking, or it does not have much purpose. And second, that no matter how much funding will be available for land banking, there will never be enough to buy up randomly all around the countries. So we need to focus on specific intervention areas where the instruments can really make a big difference, at least if we talk about selling and buying. While, as we have discussed and also with the first panel, the mediation of these instruments is, let's say, much more suitable for a countrywide immediate approach. Now, with this, we have received some interesting questions from the participants, and I will try to ask as many of these as we have the time for in the 20 minutes that remain of the webinar today. And I will begin with the first question that comes from Andrei Matang in Ukraine. And Andrei is asking if it's advisable to privatize public agricultural land free of charge or significantly cheaper than the market value for small farmers. And I think this could be a question where I would like to start to hear the opinion of Ramona, and then the others could add your opinion as well. And if you want to speak, then please use the raise hand function in the Zoom, so I can give you the floor. Thank you.
So you invited me to respond?
Yes, please.
We as a peasant movement, Via Campesina in Europe, has been close to the problems of our brothers and sisters from Ukraine. They are going through very big problems of land liberalization that are claiming to be in the name of human rights, the human rights to sell land. And we have unfortunately witnessed how the land policies in Ukraine have been really liberalized, and there will be extremely big problems of access to land very soon. So we need to protect and prevent that to protect the small farmers and to prevent that we create situations like in Western Europe where young farmers cannot access land because it's way too expensive, because you have to pay 40,000, 50,000 sometimes euros per hectare. And these are resources that the young generation doesn't have. We certainly need to protect the interests of the young farmers, because we need to still have agriculture. We need to have a future in agriculture. And we cannot allow that only the rich who have resources to money can access this extremely important resource. For us, the smallholders, land is not a commodity. It's our basis of our livelihoods. So we do believe that public policies need to change the paradigm, need to shift the direction that we're heading towards now. Only supporting, providing support for the international market and for profit and for trade and so on. We need to protect the people who are active in agriculture. We need to protect the rural communities. We don't believe that land banks are going to fix the problem. There can be an instrument, a marginal instrument, but we need to change the principles and we need to reprioritize who is important in public policies in agriculture overall. We need comprehensive agrarian reforms where land banking can be included as instruments, but land banks cannot be the beating heart of how land will be managed from now on. We believe that we need to redistribute resources, and land cannot only be accessed by those who have money. So yeah, for us, human rights are the main criteria that public policies need to be based on, and the priority for the young farmers, for the women, for the small farmers, for those who practice agroecological farming, because we need not only food, but we need healthy food. This health crisis is showing us all the things we've been done wrong. We need the political will to back the real solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that the use of land banks to, as André is suggesting, to privatize state-owned land to specific target groups. It could be small farms, it could be farms owned of young farmers, could be one of the instruments. And we heard also in the first panel the East German experiences in this area as well. I know Poland also had experiences with this, selling land to specific target groups at a reduced price as an alternative to auction it on the market. So Thomas, you have a short comment on this?
Yes, I raised my hand in Zoom. So just a short comment. I think I agree with Ramona's arguments, and also would like to say that apparently there should also have to be a safeguarding system just to ensure that this land which is privatized in a better conditions or for a better price would not end up finally in the hands of large landholders. Just you privatize and then the land is resold. So this was a danger that I saw on an example for example, of the stock options, where the company distributes shares and then they are resold immediately to the competitors. So here also there should be a certain safeguard that this land is used by the target group of people, at least for a limited period of time. I don't know, but it's an issue to analyze. Yeah, thank you.
Here I could maybe mention that the EU support measures under the World Development Programs, for example, on early retirement, they have linkages where this land is, let's say, blocked. You cannot further sell it for 5 years after you have purchased it on such favorable conditions. The same with land that is supported by the public funds through a land consolidation project. You also have let's say a short moratorium on those parcels that participate. So that could be one of the ways of dealing with this. Yeah, Thomas, back to you.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, because actually, if we do not provide for this safeguard, then even through privatization, the state budget will not receive the money, and distribute the land for free or at a very low price. That means not collect the funds, and if there is no this safeguarding mechanism, this land will be resold by private people then to other groups of interest in people. So I fully agree.
No, it's important to avoid the speculation in land markets in general. In any way, it's very difficult to do in practice, but I think we should all aim to try to get speculation out of the land market. And let's say use the valuable resource for those who want to farm and make a living out of it. Mariah, you want to comment this as well?
Yes, I had more some suggestions in the same line as you mentioned already, but I would like to emphasize that it would be good to have a distinction between the policy and the land banking instrument that is implementing the policy. So if you would like to prioritize certain target groups like the young farmers or the small scale farmers, that you should have that laid down in policy, and then the land banking is your implementation of that policy. And I also fully support the idea of having a specific clause in the land transaction document when you provide land at a reduced price for those targeted groups. On the other hand, you can also think of having an agricultural subsidy for young farmers instead of putting it in reducing the land price, having the normal land market price, but then offer the young farmers a subsidy for which they can apply. So then you separate the land banking with the agricultural policy and subsidy framework. That will be perhaps a bit better, perhaps, so that you can still have the normal liberal land market, irrespective of the subsidy for the farmers, so to say. So you have the same effect, I hope, but in a different way organized.
No, it can be supported in different ways for sure. Christina, you want to comment this as well?
Yes, thank you, Morten. I just want to complement what colleagues already said. The discussion we are having now is brings one important point into light. This is why land management policy should be carefully set in line with the overall agricultural policy, and each and every instrument used, including land banking, should be designed and embedded in the legal framework in a way that supports the policy objectives that are set. So I fully agree. Privatization of the state-owned land, since this is the current topic of discussion, should be done in a targeted way, with to achieve the goals set in the land in the overall agricultural policy. Of course, this includes support to the young farmers, to the smallholders, to the family farms, in a ways that we can empower them and ensure that they could not only continue the agricultural production but also grow.
Thank you very much. Now we do not have so much time left. Let's see if we can manage to have a couple of more questions. We have an interesting question from Andrew Cartwright. Andrew is asking about the abandoned land, and that there's usually restoration costs to make the land more attractive. I think some of us who participated in the LandNet regional workshop in Galicia saw how in Galicia the land is being cleaned for bushes that have overgrown this land that has been outside of utilization for some years. We have also seen abandoned land in other countries, like, for example, in Armenia, where there are, let's say, rocks too big to farm the land in an efficient way with normal machinery. So the question from Andrew is if it's also the task of the land bank to let's say, make the land attractive for farming. So investing in this. I don't know who would want to answer this. Maybe Thomas?
Thank you, Andrew, for this question. And I think that both models are feasible and could be applied. It depends on the situation and the policy that the land banking is using. As we could see, for example, my Galician colleagues could correct me if I'm wrong, but as you mentioned, Morten, we saw in Galicia that the land bank cleans the land from bushes, but they have contractual obligations with the landowner, so that the landowner lets this land to be incorporated into the Galician land bank, and then later on leased for a certain period of time. So if the landowner doesn't respect this obligation, then he or she would have to cover the relevant costs of cleaning. Also another well, I would say possibility, and what we see in the theoretical level for a moment in Lithuania is that certain funds are allocated to restructure and improve the abandoned land, for example, and to hopefully in the near future resell it in the market, you know, and of course there will be a difference in price between the abandoned land and non-structured land into when you sell the correctly structured and improved land in the market. So you will have this margin buying and selling price, you know. So this is also a part of the financing mechanism for this transaction.
Okay, if there are no more comments on this question, I think, Christina, you have a raised hand, but I think, is it for now or from before?
Well, it's from before, but I want to add something to what Thomas just said. The way we are combating land abandonment currently under the land consolidation program in North Macedonia is that during the land valuation, initial land valuation, in fact, this land that is not into production has, let's say, decreased agricultural production value, which means that interested participants in land consolidation could get it without cleaning and clearing of the whatever structure is on it, but they could get a larger portion or a larger area through the land consolidation process. And interestingly enough, we have a lot of interested landowners for such land, since which are willing to clean or put the land back into production on their own expense for, let's say, exchange getting a larger area. So of course this is done on a project level, and we cannot say that this influences the land abandonment on national level that much, but again, it is a mechanism with which we can put abandoned land back into production through land consolidation. Thank you.
Okay, let's have one more question from the participants. Henk Moon from the Netherlands is asking, how can we involve decentralization? And I think this is also an important issue. For example, in large countries, we talked about Spain, Galicia, where the land banking is organized at the level of Galicia. But in principle, land banks can function at a national level, at a regional level, or even at a local level. I don't know if we have any opinions among the panelists on what should be, let's say, the priorities for countries that are introducing land banking instruments.
If I could say a word?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it very much depends on the country, you know, on its structure and on the size of the country itself. And I do not see a big problem if it's a decentralized model. But for me, the key issue here would be, two key issues would be here, the know-how, how to do land banking, because even if you do all these capacity building programs, etc., the number of people that you need to actually implement these instruments must reach to a certain level, so that the instrument starts to function in a respective country. Because politicians change, people who have this know-how change, etc. So there is a real capacity building issue for me, but in a large country, a decentralized model, I don't see a very big problem with that. And of course, another issue is system of safeguards. How do you ensure that you know, local decentralized structures do not abuse the instrument itself and do not use it for their own benefit, rather than for the benefit of general state policies? So these are my remarks about that.
No, these are good points, Thomas. I think it's also our experiences from the projects that we are doing that the capacity development that is very much needed is the most difficult. It's not to develop a good law or even make it operational. That may take a couple of attempts, but to really have sufficient capacity for the upscale of the activities, from going from pilot projects to doing land banking or land consolidation, which is similar in a much larger scale. This really requires a lot of efforts and a lot of efforts of the government agencies that are involved in this as well. Yeah, Maria, you want to add a comment on this also?
Yes, I would like to emphasize that having one institution responsible for land banking has certain advantages regarding accountability, because you have one organization that can be held accountable. You can also, regarding capacity building, you can learn from each other, and with more people, well, you have more capacity to do than if you have like 5 decentralized land banking organizations. However, you can also combine it than having one institution but with local offices. So because you also need, of course, to have the local knowledge about, especially about the land market. It's just not simply buying a parcel. You need to know what the local land price is. So you have to make informed decisions. You need some basic information about the land market, about the legislation and rules that apply, etc. So if you have one organization, you can have, for example, one system. You can exchange knowledge, but still with local branches, you can have also access to the local market and knowledge about local issues. So, well, there's solutions in different ways, I would say.
We have many more good questions from the participants. I think we have only time for one more quick question, and I would pick the one that comes from Miklos Attila Boros. It was not mentioned from which country, but the name sounds Hungarian. This is about the how to that based on these experiences and observations of the speakers involved in the piloting of land banking and land consolidation, who are then the final beneficiaries of these activities? That is a question. And there's also an additional comment saying that it's a valid worry that the social dynamics in farming completely changes after the implementation of such instruments. And where I would say maybe this is part of the intention. We want to use these instruments to implement the public policy in this area. But I don't know if any of the panelists would have a comment on that. I would not see this as a negative, but actually as something positive. Ramona, you want to comment this?
Yeah, I would like to comment. We believe as small farmers, as we represent the majority of the people that are engaged in farming, that are producing food, that are feeding our countries, our communities. We believe that it's this majority that needs to be the beneficiary of public policies on land. We also believe that the land banking are instruments. They're not ways of implementing land public policies in general. They're instruments that needs to start slow, and that needs to start by consulting with the rural communities. In every country, in every region, there is a different reality. Of course, the main problems are the same, but these instruments need to respond to the local realities in order to have a positive impact on the future. We also believe that because we're living a crisis, these instruments need to respond to the crisis. Unfortunately, the study does not include this element of crisis. This crisis has aggravated historic problems and has added problems that did not exist before. So they need to be assessed. And they can only be assessed by speaking with the people from the ground. Unfortunately, there has not been enough time for the research to catch up with the reality. The times are being very difficult. Communication is very difficult. So we need to give necessary time for this this assessment process and the dialogue. We need to give the dialogue the importance that it has, and we need to put the local communities at the center. Otherwise, if we're just building another problem through land banks and making the rich richer and making the agriculture more unhealthy than it already is, and poisoning our environment more than it already is, well, this is just another huge failure. So caution. Putting the social elements first, the people first, and not the profit, not the international market. These are the important priorities that we see for any land policies, and the land policies need to be integrated in a broader land reform, because I can obtain land through a land bank, but if I have no access to market, nothing is really solved. So it needs to be integrated in broader changes that are so necessary in the food and agriculture sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramona. I think that was a good place to end, and we are kind of back to the words that Raymond said in the introduction about the need to integrate and look at all these issues in a holistic way. And I think we have managed this also today. Not look at land banks or land consolidation as purely technical instruments, but see them in the policy context that they should be seen in, and that we use these instruments to pursue specific objectives that should be in the public interest. So time is coming to end this webinar, and I have very much enjoyed the discussion that we have had today, and I hope that you who have followed it have done the same. We have heard about the experiences with land banking from different Western European countries, and also about the need for the instruments in Eastern Europe. We have discussed the key issues that are important for the finalization of the upcoming FAO study on land banking and its recommendation. Thanks for the comments, and thanks for all of you who would send additional comments by email to Thomas, as mentioned. Thanks a lot to the participants in the two panels for sharing your insight on land banking and for the interesting discussions. Also, thanks to all of those of you who participated and who asked the questions to the second panel and provided the comments in the chat. We welcome all these additional comments and suggestions as well until the end of the day. So let me say that we will inform all of you when we will be ready to publish the Land Bank study report in the beginning of 2021. And as I already mentioned in the introduction, the recording of the webinar today is available on YouTube and will be further published and announced. So finally, I want to inform you that we are, in addition to what we have discussed today and in addition to the study, we are in FAO planning to organize in January an online survey about the application of land consolidation and land banking instruments in different countries. Our focus is, of course, on Europe, since we are from the Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia, but we would encourage everybody around the world to participate in this survey as well. And filling in of the questionnaire will only take 5 minutes, and I hope that we will be able to establish an overview that, at least to my understanding, nobody has had so far on the global application of these instruments. And I think that could be very useful for the further discussion as well. Thank you very much, and goodbye. Thank you.